ITMAlive Season 3, featuring a panel discussion on textile recycling for a circular economy. Discover effective textile waste management to accelerate circularity in the textile and garment industry. Featuring on this panel discussion, Luna Aslan, Trisha Carey, Julia Blees. Moderated by Robert van der Kerkhoff.
A very warm welcome from my side to this ITMAlive session on textile recycling for a circular economy. My name is Robert van der Kerkhoff. I'm the president at CERS, the European Man-Made Fiber Association, and I'm the chief commercial officer at Lenzing, with in total approximately 25 years of experience in the fiber industry. Now, today's session is all about circularity in textiles. For me, it's one of the most important game changers that our industry will be able to capture in the next couple of years. We all know that the textile industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world. We've got huge carbon emissions throughout the value chain. We are really impacting our water with the dyeing and finishing processes. And we've been confronted with challenges from NGOs like the Detox campaign, like the Fossil Fashion campaign, or like the Dirty Fashion campaign. But the circularity really is going to be the biggest game changer that we are confronted with. And that is also creating an opportunity for us to really change the way how we work. So let us start with introducing the very exciting panel. First, Trisha Carey. Trisha is the Chief Commercial Officer at RenewCell. Trisha.
Thank you, Robert. Great to see you. Yes, my name is Trisha Carey, and I'm Chief Commercial Officer at RenewCell, where I oversee the sales, business development, and marketing. I found that at RenewCell, what we do is we take textile waste, we take the cellulose and make it into a pulp, which we then brand as circulose. I spent over 25 years at Lenzing, where I was in various commercial positions, and I'm also involved in industry organizations and associations like the UN Fashion Conscious and Lifestyle Network, as well as Accelerating Circularity and Transformers Foundation.
Thank you, Trisha. Now let me introduce our second panelist, Julia Blees. Julia is the Policy Director of the European Recycle Industry Confederations in Brussels. Julia.
Thanks, Robert. It's great to be here and see you all. As you already mentioned, I'm Julia Blees. I work at EURIC, and within EURIC, we are the organization that represents the interests of the recycling industry at a European level. That means we are organized within several waste streams. We cover paper, plastics, metals, but of course, and this is important for today, also textiles. And within textiles, within our textiles branch, we represent sorters, collectors, sorters, and recyclers within Europe, and we try to represent them at European level with the European institutions.
Excellent. And last but not least, Luna Aslan. Luna is the co-founder of NOSA in Belgium. Luna.
Thank you, Robert. So yes, indeed, I'm leading a NOSA project since 2019, and so the idea of NOSA was really born on offering a solution to brand and to the manufacturer regarding textile waste. So at NOSA, we produce a textile fiber made from corn, for which we've developed the technology to make it 100% recyclable at the end of life without deteriorating it, and this endlessly.
Really great. All very welcome to this panel. I think it's a very diverse group, so we're going to get some exciting insights. So let me start with the first question, and maybe let me start in with you, Trisha. What are some of the game-changing developments in the global fiber industry that actually will help to accelerate the textile and garment industry towards circularity?
Well, as you said, Robert, this really is such an exciting time in a textile industry. It's really going through a whole evolution. And we see this like every 20 years, all the changes that happen in the industry. And right now, the importance around circularity is really driven primarily by a lot that's happening in policy. And for years, the textile and apparel industry was left unregulated. But what we see that's happening in Europe, especially driving those regulations, I sit in the United States, and in the US, we're really lagging behind We have one state that has put in textile regulations, and that's the state of Massachusetts. But we'll see that global retailers and brands have to design to the highest standard, and that is being set in Europe. Besides policy, I would say we also see a lot happening within technology, and here a lot of the innovations and from fellow panelists as well, we'll hear more about that. But even what we're doing at RenewCell, a lot of the IP and patents related to technology, this is definitely changing the landscape. And third, I would say, is funding. Finally, the textile industry is getting some attention around funding that is desperately needed in order to propel the industry forward. So between policy, technology, and funding, those are the key areas that I would say we're seeing a lot of the change.
Excellent. I think it's a very good overview. And then, as you mentioned, policy first. Julia, what do you see then from your perspective as a game-changing opportunity?
Yeah, I think, Robert, you and Trisha just both mentioned it from a European and a regulatory standpoint. What we see here in Europe with the publication of the textile strategy on the 30th of March of 2022, this is, I think, or will be rather a game changer for the whole industry, because Trisha mentioned it before, textiles was never really regulated before because, it just didn't happen. But now, starting with the Green Deal and Circular Economy Action Plan here in the EU, we've already seen more focus on textiles, and this all was translated into the textile strategy, which over the next few years will have some legislative changes stemming from the strategy, because as you know, the strategy itself is just a communication. Nothing changes immediately from the strategy, but the strategy points towards laws that should be changing. And here it's a wide variety of laws that will change, like eco-design laws, end of waste for textiles, recycled content together with eco-design, and so on and so on. So there is, I think, a lot of room for improvement, a lot of room for circularity, and this will, over the next years, clearly change the playing field we are all in within the textile sector, for sure.
I think it's a very good point, and of course it's an EU legislation, but as you say, it will also go to the design, so it will impact the whole world. So the whole supply chain is global, but they will need to meet the European standards. Now, another point that was mentioned was technology. So from your perspective, Luna, how do you see the opportunities for game changers?
Thank you, Robert. I think, as Nusa, we are very lucky to be in Europe, as we just mentioned, because we see everything like really going in our sense. Definitely a lot of policy and also investment really supporting what we're trying to do. When it comes to technology, we're quite lucky to be surrounded by a lot of amazing technologies tackling like really different problems of the change currently. I think we still need extra funding to be able to scale that up and really tackle the challenge also that is sorting and collecting in order to really loop the loop. Because here we have the technology, but of course all the actors have to play hand in hand to make sure that we really close the loop. And also like regarding innovators, I think it's important today to really focus on what can be recyclable and not only on what can be recycled anymore.
It's a very good statement indeed. It's what can be recycled is going to be, I think, the opportunity as the game changer. Now, Julia, do you believe that the textile waste actually can become the source material then for the textile and chemical industry? So can textile waste, the waste stream, become the oil of the 21st century?
That's a good question. And when we think about the topic of today's ITMA talk, it's circularity in textiles. In my opinion, circularity doesn't work without recycled materials that you can use over and over again to produce something. And this is what is very, very important. And I mentioned it already before. In the EU, we have the so-called Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation that was published. The proposal was published also on the 30th of March. And here we also see a focus on recycled content. We know now that textiles will be one of the delegated acts, so one of the major product categories that will be regulated under this law, under this eco-design law. And one of the points, as I said, will be recycled content, which of course means that the recycled materials that Trisha and Luna, that they produce, they will be taken up by the producers again. They will have to be taken up by the producers again, because otherwise we will not have a circular economy if what we recycle doesn't end up in a product again. So this for me is a clear yes to your answer. I think recycled textile waste, what is recycled then into recycled fibers or whatever, will be really the feedstock for producers in the future. I know we do have still a lot of scaling up to do until this is happening, but I think we all, at least all that we are sitting at this virtual table today, we all agree that this has to happen. And yeah, I'm very much looking positive in the future that this will happen at some point.
Very, very true. Luna, your perspective?
Yes, agreed. So yeah, if you make your product recyclable, you will be able to use it in recycled content again and again. So I really agree with Julia here.
Excellent. Trisha?
Yeah, I think we also have to take a look at some of the numbers, right? And for years, we were using the number of 50 million tons of textile and apparel waste a year. Well, now that there's been more focus around circularity and assessing what waste we have, it's actually a number that's growing 90 to 100 million tons a year of textile waste. Now let's look at how much do we make in fibers a year? We make what, 105 to 110 million tons of fiber. So when we start to look up those numbers, the way that they're adding up, we're almost throwing away everything that we're producing as far as fibers a year. So we no longer really have to look at it as waste anymore, and textile waste, because it's really an unused asset that we need to bring back into the circle. So I think definitely we'll be refining, if you're looking at it from those oil terms, we'll be refining textiles to be used again. And you know, the beauty of what we have with a lot of the new technologies is that we can have a new harvest every day if you're looking at it from more of a cotton perspective. So I think the numbers are there. A lot of research to build the case studies has been developed, and this is where we need to look at to propel forward.
No, indeed, very good point. And I think you already touched base a little bit on the amount of waste. It's huge, and there are different ways of addressing that waste. Now, we always need to avoid waste. I think that is in any of the industries. I think Julia is very familiar with that, but I mean, we need to reduce maybe some of the purchases we're doing on textiles. We definitely need to go into business models like reuse. Those are the kind of opportunities we should consider. But what in your opinion, and maybe Luna, we start with you now, what in your opinion are some of the most effective ones to move the textile industry towards really the circular system?
I mean, I strongly believe in the technology we've chosen, meaning the chemical recycling technology that is indeed not available for all types of fibers. So for example, I know Renewcell, it's quite different because you use cellulosic materials. In our case, we've really developed the end of life of our product before marketing it. And we picked the chemical recycling because we were able to recover 100% of our material, and this virgin, showing also a lower impact throughout the whole life cycle. But today, I mean, I think we have to encourage any type of recycling, but when it's possible to go for something that is like thermal recycling or chemical recycling, if it makes sense at the general impact, then we should go for it.
Trisha?
Yeah, well, I think as you mentioned, Robert, you know, there's a lot of different ways to look at circularity, and within the hierarchy of waste, you know, if it's first of all to reduce, which is, you know, that changing the consumer's mindset. I mean, we're just coming off of Black Friday and the holiday season when we're recording this. You know, consumption's at all-time high. So how do we shift all of that rental resale? But I think when you get into recycling, and certainly what we're doing here at Renewcell, where we're taking cellulose from textile waste, and now we're working with a 95% cellulose And we're looking to then bring that even down to a 90% cellulose, where we can take that textile and then make it into the pulp. And here what we're able to do in recycling the cellulose is actually get that pulp to a quality that we would be able to work with fiber producers where they can make first quality fiber. Because I think it's very important to also consider the quality of materials and that durability, because we have to get out of that cycle where things are only used for a short period of time. So quality is very important when we look at what needs to be done. And so within this hierarchy, it's almost how there's omni-channels for shopping. It's kind of your omni-channel for circularity, right? There's not only one way, and we have to be able to approach this to the consumer, that there's many ways that they can look at how circularity can be brought in. And of course, with any change, this is a systemic change that needs to happen. And so there's going to be trade-offs and different ways that we need to look at how we've traditionally, viewed the textile and apparel industry. So I think, again, these circular systems, what we're doing at RenewCell and to continue to build this scale, because speed to market is very important. As Julia mentioned, a lot of the policy that's happening, we need to get moving on this now. At RenewCell, we just opened our first scale facility at 60,000 tons. We'll be adding another 60,000 tons to that and continue to build from there. So having the right product, ours is 100% recycled. And I think that's another important fact that we'll start to see, garments labeled as inputs into this garment are recycled at 50%, 70%. And how can we continue to push the industry forward? So many different ways, but it's definitely looking at the hierarchy.
Oh, excellent. Julia?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Trisha. I think it's reuse and recycling will have to go hand in hand. That's for sure, because if I look at, again, I very much am EU focused, but if I look at the separate waste collection that's coming our way in 2025 here in the EU, we will have quite some textile waste, and not all of it will be able to be reused. Some of it will go to recycling, and we will all be able to have a market for both, for reusable textiles, but also for textile waste that can go to recycling. So this is, again, coming from a regulatory perspective, that we see there will be a high amount of textile waste due to the separate collection in 2025 or in some European countries earlier, and that we will have to deal with this. So this will be a challenge. But I think with reuse and recycling together, and recycling, be it mechanical, chemical, or whatever is available, everyone will have a role to play, and only together it will work. And then to try to work with those challenges, what comes to my mind, of course, is EPR schemes. This is something that is on the rise here in Europe. We have an EPR scheme, Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme, in France already for several years. The Netherlands will be the next country in January 2023 implementing an EPR scheme. And I think if they are properly set up within the EU, somewhat harmonized, of course, but I realize that's not so easy. That will also help solve the problem a little bit. But yeah, this is all for the future, especially with 2025 and the separate waste collection for textiles. I think it's inevitable that we will have to have such EPR schemes up and running, and all of this together, I think can tackle the problem and turn the problem into raw materials that we can use over and over again.
Yeah. No, extremely true. And I think it's really exciting to hear the three of you talking about some of the opportunities and also see how aligned you are. Now, considering that this is one of the biggest opportunities for our industry, I'm sure there are also some challenges. So maybe, Trisha, starting then with you, what do you think could be some of the challenges that are really important for us to consider as we are embarking on this journey for the next couple of years?
Yeah. Well, when we were in school in geometry, we always learned that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Well, that's not what we're doing, right? We're not taking the shortest distance here. It's much harder in this circular way of looking at things. So if I break it down, I would say we have to view more as a supply network and not a supply chain anymore. So this means new people around the table. I mean, Luna, you mentioned this, collectors and sorters and processors, they all need to be involved in this. And I think a great organization that's doing some excellent work is Accelerating Circularity. They're doing work in Europe as well as in the US and really connecting everyone there. I also think, you know, we have to bring this back to the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. If they can be the framework behind what we're doing and how we're building this circular community within textiles and apparel, very important. I think second, the challenge is around the brands. They need to look at how they're doing business in a different way. And they traditionally have held so much power in the industry. And so brands and retailers, they need to set goals with a roadmap, not just laying out some goal and making that sound great for themselves, but really how are they looking at circularity and connecting that back to climate action as well as to transparency. So brands need to play a very important role here. And I would say the last point, if we're going to look at rebuilding the textile industry and what we need to do differently, we have to put people in the middle. Social standards are just as important as environmental standards. And as we look at circularity, we need to look at what's happening, you know, as we have new players. Is there, you know, areas that have been, you know, around corruption more? Where do we have fair labor standards, gender equality? All of this, we have to put people in the middle of that circle. So, you know, rebuilding, a lot of challenges, looking at what needs to happen within community, within the textile organizations, what the brands and retailers, their responsibility, and then also on the social side.
Really, really very good statement. Appreciate that. Julia, from your perspective, some of the challenges?
Yeah, I think there are still several challenges to overcome. What we just, I think, all mentioned before, there will be a lot of textile waste coming our way, and we do have to scale up our sorting, our collection, our recycling. I think this is the very, very practical challenge that we are all facing, that currently there isn't enough capacity. And we know we will have a lot of infeed, and I know we are working on this, but it will take years to be completed. So this is something, I think, a very, very practical challenge that we are all facing. And then I also actually see some legal challenges. I know the textile strategy is really pinpointing, highlighting the textile sector as a whole, but I also see when looking at that there are certain definitions that aren't harmonized, that one person talks about something and another may mean something different. And if we don't speak the same language, we cannot tackle the problems together. A very easy example actually is textile waste. I know in some countries, when you put what I personally would consider to be a textile waste, you put it in the collection bin, but then it's not a waste. It is still considered to be a product, even though a person discarded something into the bin. In other countries, Germany, for instance, once you throw something in the collection bin, it's automatically, whatever is in there, considered to be a waste. So I feel like, and this is very basic, but for me, this is a big challenge, that we have to have the same definitions, and we have to have, at least within the EU, within the US, we have to have the same rules across a certain, you know, amount of countries to be able to tackle the problem. Because if one country defines something differently than another, or even on a person-to-person level, we do have a problem. So I think it's really first of all, with the definitions, but also then, of course, the mindset, going a little bit more spiritual. But this, for me, is a very, very big challenge that we have, and I hope the EU strategy will tackle this, that we have the same definitions, that we have the same rules across here the EU, because then we speak about the same, and then we can, you know, move together into the same direction. But if we don't have the same words, definitions, we can actually not do that. So this is very much a legal challenge, but I think I very much hope that we can overcome this also with the strategy soon.
Again, very valid, and we do need policymakers to make this turn happen. Luna, last but not least.
So I will insist on the sorting and collecting, which is to me the the most important in order to become circular. Is at different level, as Julia just said. Of course, you can really like regulate it with policies. I think from a purely provider, like a fiber provider, as we are, we can try to enhance the traceability of our products so that they become more detectable for more effective sorting and a better recycling with higher value products at the end of the chain, which is also quite complicated, of course. And it's also important to define who will be facing the cost, because we've talked about the EPR scheme, for example. I think now the industry at different level definitely needs incentives. Yes, the brands, the final consumer, but also the recycler in itself. And another challenge we're really facing at NUSA, and I can only talk for the European market now, is really reboosting the textile industry. Infrastructure is one thing, and it can be solved easily with money. But what we see is also like we need to re-educate the whole textile supply network. I will use your word, Tricia, not only at the end customer and brand level, but really throughout the whole manufacturing system, especially when it comes to more innovative and new materials, similarly to what we can do at Renewcell or NUSA. And people are not especially like aware of what it is or used to process it effectively in qualitative products. And so, yeah, definitely it's also related to financing and scaling up.
Excellent. Really extremely valuable insights, and I think it shows clearly that we are coming in a new era of the textile value chain. It's going to be kicked off in Europe. We heard about it. The policymakers in Europe are really taking on this challenge very aggressively, but it will have an impact on the rest of the world. So, but the policymaker will be needed to make sure that there's a fair and equal playing field. The definitions are very clear. But at the same time, we as an industry need to step up. We need to step up on innovations. And I think with NUSA and with Renewcell, we've seen two very innovative companies contributing to this panel. But a lot of other innovations are needed. And what we also heard is that not one solution is required. Multiple solutions are required because the amount of waste is significant, and it's just going to increase in the next few years. For that, we need investments. Now, these are companies that are willing to make the bets. These are also then, of course, other investors that need to really make sure that they invest in green industries. But again, here we're also looking at policymakers, like with EPR schemes, to actually finance that transition. Because we know that with a circular economy in textiles, we do need funds, we do need support to make the transition, but we also know that once the transition is completed, that if we do have the economy of scale, that a circular economy textile can and will be actually a profitable business model. So with that, it's very exciting to see what's going on. A very holistic view. I would like to thank very much the panelists for the valuable insights, and I would like to thank ITMA for giving us the opportunity to share these insights with the group, and of course also thanking ITMA for their support on driving circularity in textiles. Thank you all.
Be a part of
The largest
Textile
and garment
technology
exhibition.